Ukrainian forces faced relentless Russian attacks on Bakhmut in its eastern Donetsk region on Monday, with both sides reporting mounting enemy casualties as they battled across a small river that bisects the ruined town and now marks the front line. The situation in the nearly deserted town was difficult, the commander of Ukrainian ground forces said, though adding that his forces were repelling all Russian attempts to capture it. All enemy attempts to capture the town are repelled by artillery, tanks, and other firepower, Colonel General Alexander Syrsky was quoted as saying on the Ukraine's Media Military Center Telegram messaging platform. Ukrainian forces control the west of Bakhmut, while Russia's Wagner mercenary group controls most of the eastern part, with the Bakhmutka River that flows through the town marking the front line, British intelligence said in a weekend update. Wagner founder Yevgeny Prigozhin said on Sunday the situation was tough, very tough. The closer we are to the center of the city, the harder the fighting. The Ukrainians throw in endless reserves. But we are advancing and we will be advancing, Prigozhin said in comments released by his press service. He also said Russian army members helped his troops with ammunition. Yesterday, we got 15 truckloads, today we got 12. And I think we will continue to receive them, he said, adding there was no conflict between his fighters and Russian troops. Prigozhin had previously complained that Russia's top brass was deliberately starving his men of ammunition, an allegation the defense ministry rejected. Reuters was not able to independently verify the report. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said late on Sunday his forces had killed more than 1,100 Russian soldiers in the past few days as they fought for control of Bakhmut. In less than a week, starting from the March 6th, we managed to kill more than 1,100 enemy soldiers in the Bakhmut sector alone, Russia's irreversible loss, Zelensky said in his nightly video address. Russian forces sustained 1,500 sanitary losses, soldiers wounded badly enough to keep them out of action, he added. Russia's defense ministry said earlier in the day that its forces had killed more than 220 Ukrainian service members over the past 24 hours in the Donetsk region. Prigozhin said Wagner will begin to reboot and start hiring once Bakhmut is captured. Wagner has opened recruitment centers across 42 cities to replenish its ranks. While Bakhmut's strategic value is debatable, Russia sees capturing it as a step towards a major aim of the war, now in its second year, of seizing all of Ukraine's Donbass industrial region. Donetsk and Luhansk regions make up the Donbass. Ukraine has decided to stay and fight on in the mining town, after initial signs it was planning to withdraw, to grind down Russia's best units ahead of an expected spring offensive by Ukrainian forces. Analysts expect a Ukrainian counteroffensive to begin in earnest over April-May as the weather improves and more military aid arrives, including heavy Leopard and Challenger tanks. Western tanks will significantly change war tactics, Leonid Koda, a decorated Ukrainian tank brigade commander, told Reuters. Everyone is waiting, 1st Tank Brigade is waiting too. Not long ago we sent personnel to learn to operate, Leopard 2A6, said Koda, who commands the 1st Siversk Tank Brigade which is fighting in the south of Donetsk. Elsewhere, Russia's air defense shot down 4 missiles over its Belgorod region bordering Ukraine on Monday, its governor said, adding that 1 person was injured. Vyacheslav Gladkov did not say who was behind the attacks, but in the past he has accused Ukrainian forces on the other side of the border of similar attacks. The Russia-controlled Ukrainian city of Donetsk was shelled 4 times on Sunday, with residential areas and power lines hit and Russian-installed officials blaming Ukraine. Ukraine almost never claims responsibility for attacks inside Russia and on Russia-controlled territory in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba has urged Germany to speed up supplies of ammunition and to start training Ukrainian pilots on Western fighter jets. Kuleba made clear he did not expect Western allies to give Ukraine the aircraft it has been asking for any time soon, but said pilots should be ready for when the decision was taken.
Hundreds of thousands of people protested against judicial reform, which they say is a threat to Israel's democracy. Iran and Saudi Arabia have restarted diplomatic relations for the first time in 7 years. Saudi Arabia and Iran are often seen as the strongest forces of Sunni and Shia Islam and have supported opposing sides in the civil wars of Syria and Yemen. China helped to negotiate the agreements, which will see embassies opened in both countries in the next 2 months. In Iran, more details have been reported about the death of Mahsa Amini, the 22-year-old woman who died after being beaten by the morality police in September last year. A new report by the Sunday Times and Iranian journalist Sajad Khodakarami includes information from many women who were also detained by the religious police at the same time as Amini. They say that the police beat her and that when she was not responsive, they waited 45 minutes before calling an ambulance. The death of Mahsa Amini sparked large protests throughout Iran, and human rights organizations say that over 500 people have died in violence between protesters and security forces since September. In Australia, there have been extreme floods in some parts of Queensland. In some areas, people have been told to stay out of the water because of the possibility of crocodiles swimming in the flooded areas. Micronesia's president has accused China of political warfare in the Pacific region. David Panuelo, who is finishing his term as president of Micronesia, has released a letter in which he says that China has used bribery and threats to interfere with Micronesia's politics, and said that China was preparing for conflict over Taiwan. In the United States, President Joe Biden has released a $6.8 trillion budget, which includes raising taxes on richer Americans and businesses, and also includes increasing spending on the military and Medicare, the government health insurance program. Republican House of Representatives leader Kevin McCarthy criticized the taxation and spending of the budget.
What does this budget do? Raise more taxes, spends more money, creates probably the biggest government we've ever seen in the history of the United States.
Also in the United States, 4 astronauts returned to Earth yesterday using a SpaceX Dragon capsule after 5 months working on the International Space Station. In Peru, at least 6 people have been killed in a cyclone which has caused major flooding. Cyclone Yaku has forced hundreds of people to leave their homes, and a state of emergency has been ordered in parts of northern Peru. Africa. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, the United Nations has said that almost 300,000 people have been forced to leave their homes because of violence in the last month. There are many armed groups in the eastern DRC, some of which are Islamist jihadist groups, such as the ADF from Uganda, and some are ethnic groups, such as the M23 Tutsi militia, which is supported by the Rwandan government, according to UN experts. There is now fighting between the DRC army and the M23 group close to the city of Goma, a city of 700,000 people, which sits on the border with Rwanda. In Mozambique, Cyclone Freddy has hit for a second time. Electricity and communications have been cut in the worst affected areas, so it is not clear how many people have been affected. Europe. In Ukraine, both Ukraine and Russia have said that they have each killed hundreds of enemy fighters this weekend in the Bakhmut area of the Donetsk region. There is fighting, especially artillery fire, across all of the front lines of Ukraine, However, it is particularly intense in the city of Bakhmut, where Russian forces have almost completely surrounded Ukrainian forces. Ukraine said that 3 civilians were killed in the Kherson region by Russian artillery on Saturday, and 3 civilians were killed in the Luhansk region yesterday by a Russian missile. The United Kingdom's public broadcaster, the BBC, is in crisis after many of its sports presenters have refused to work. Football presenter Gary Lineker was suspended after making comments criticising the government's immigration policy, which the BBC said had broken the BBC's impartiality rules. However, many other BBC sports staff have refused to work to show support for Lineker. In France, the Senate has accepted a reform of the pension system, which includes raising the retirement age from 62 to 64. There were more protests against the change this weekend. And in Germany, researchers have found that people need more sleep during the winter. Scientists in Berlin studied people at different times of the year and found that people sleep an average of 1 hour more during the winter. A big thank you to Bettina in Germany and Doris in Austria for becoming our newest supporters.